Hi, marketers. This is Dots, and welcome to Marketing Leadership Podcast. With me here is Eyitayo Ogunmola, the CEO of Utiva. Today, we will discuss about technology talent and how global jobs are coming to Africans. So it's quite a unique perspective we are looking at here, and very appropriate given that there is a cold recession globally. So if you want to strap in, let's go. Eyitayo, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I am well. I am well. Doing very well.
Absolutely. Honor to have you on the pod. I got your outreach and I told my wife that I think I have arrived. So that is awesome. Thank you so much for honoring this and doing
Thank
this
you
with
for doing this. Thank you for
me.
doing this.
For those who don't know you, especially within the tech space, can you tell us about yourself, all the great traction that you've made, and where things are headed at?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting opportunity. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Mm.
I am Eyitayo. I am a technology entrepreneur. I've been in the tech space now for about 10 years or so. I started my journey as that very frustrated young guy that left the university really thinking about how to make sense of life. But I think that I some sort of like got lucky, moved to the US in 2015 as a product and partnership fellow through a program called Atlas Corp. I worked with Creative DC for 1 year, joined Half Presence as a vice president product and partnership. Um, then moved to the UK as a Chieftain scholar to do a master's in business strategy. Started Utiva as a platform that some sort of like helps Africans, regardless of your location, to learn advanced premium technology skills and move into jobs. I've had a fair share of my own global opportunities. For
Yeah.
instance, UK Global Talent got the endorsement in 2020. The same year I became a Facebook Accelerator leader, an Alcyon Incubator fellow, a Global Good Fund fellow, and that continues like that.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
the core, at the center of the work that I do is tech and the talent. And some sort of like my vision is to connect millions of talent to global jobs right from Africa here. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting, interesting take. And if not for you guys, I don't know how I guess the tech space in Africa would have been today. And when I
Yeah.
say you guys, there are a couple of other people as well,
Yeah.
um, you
Yeah.
know, doing all kinds of things. So this is really, really, great. Um, when it comes to talent, I've been in marketing for not so long, 13, 14 years. I've gone from, working for corporations to working on the agency side where I am currently. I've been part of two startups myself. One is, currently a podcast promotion uh, service, and the other being a small shop I created back at the time. Uh, and even within that, there's also like freelancing and things like that I did. And it's, I guess, at that time, it opened my mind to the global possibilities, just as you said, in terms of global exposure and things like that. Now, for anyone on the pod that is listening that is, uh, you know, here in the West, let's put it that way, and saying, what are some of the benefits of having Africans help me out with some of my work? What are some of those benefits that you would, immediately tell them? And feel free to go as blunt or as direct as possible, because that could also help.
Yeah, so quite a very interesting way to start the conversation. This is a continent of almost 1.2 billion people, right?
Mm,
And one of the
mm,
things I tell people is over the past 30 years, we've had a rise in the middle class. Now we have a middle class that is up to 3112 million people on the continent. The
Mm.
interesting thing is internet penetration now, on the continent, especially in Nigeria, is as high as 70%. You know,
Yeah.
I
It's been
know
that
that
for a while.
I know that the cost of internet is still the cost of data and the cost of internet is still on the high side, but the
Mm.
penetration is quite very high. But there are three major unique things about, the continent and especially Nigeria. Number one is the large pool and the ecosystem of talent. You know, One typical thing about Nigerians is that we are super aggressive people. So
Yes.
that
My
aggression,
producer, my producer Brian can attest to that. So
is what you will typically see when you hire a Nigerian. You would see when everybody closes by 5, a Nigerian
mm,
would extend for another 4 hours, just bringing that
yeah.
value, to the table. And that's something you would have seen in our music industry. You would have seen that in our, film producing, space, and also in the technology industry. That's why you hear a lot of tech startups here and there. And these tech startups are powered by the talent ecosystem that we have. And then, the mobile phone penetration, laptops and internet devices penetration is also high, you know. But one
Mm,
other interesting thing about Nigeria is also the fact that we are really well positioned, for the entire European markets, in terms of the time zone. And then we
mhm,
speak better English too,
mhm,
when compared to the other markets. So when you
mhm,
put all the things together, one of the things you then realize is that now is the best time for us to begin to, shape our talent, globally. So the thing that we are doing as a country and many other players now is to build the rail, that
mm,
helps us to then shape our talent and connect our talent to international jobs. But every time I talk to employers, and we've got over 200 of those type of great companies that are hiring our talents today, and these are multinationals in Africa, outside Africa, there are
mhm,
two major things that excite them. It's the fact that Nigerians are very aspirational. So when you hire someone for customer service, the next 1 year, what you then see is that that person has probably built a capacity in cybersecurity. So
mhm,
upskilling is something that comes natural to us as a continent, as a country, and
mm,
that's a path, to more talent for companies that place a bet on the African continent, right? Then
mhm,
the second thing is the support ecosystem that we have, as a country. And that's one of the things that many of the employers are very excited about. The fact that, there would
mm,
always be a talent for your work, readily available, for your work. You would never be at other points that you're drained or you are stranded as a company, right? And when you
mhm,
put all these things together, you see that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And this is the best time for, companies, organizations globally to plug into that ecosystem, and be the first to get value from the talent pool, the talent ecosystem, the talent community that we have, in Nigeria and in the African continent.
mm. Interesting. I am personally, and of course, I don't always like to go uh, geographic with my persona and my podcast, but I guess there are some exceptions. I'm incredibly pleased with some of the things you've said, with the reports that you've just given. I'm a lover of history, and the Nigerian youths, at least in the last 40 years, didn't at the beginning of those last 40 years, didn't have a good history. I mean, it's not still perfect right now, but for most of what we see today, even in places like not just Europe, but even in Canada and the US, um, there's so much of those things that you've mentioned, right? Even in the US, there's so much of that aspiration, let's put it that way, that you see. There's a lot of positivity that comes from that, and the fact that that is even happening locally and even with other countries in Africa is something that is really, really great. Now, here is where my challenge is, Eyitayo. um I- and I'm seeing how you can carefully phrase your answer here, but I don't want to call it a competition, but can Black Africa, or even any other Africa country, can can they join the other already established communities, from this talent pool that you talk about? Like the Indians. Many people don't mention the Philippines, but that's also just as great. Um, can they join these countries when it comes to talent outsourcing for tech jobs, for marketing jobs, for remote jobs? Obviously, for business leaders in the West, there's a cost saving aspect to that, and feel free to mention that as well. But is it possible for Africans to be able to join those, I guess, demographic or communities in expanding and further diversifying that talent pool, so that those on the pod that are business owners that are listening would say, well, yeah, I think I have a lot of choices. I'm not just limited to a few demographics.
So one of the things that I tell many of the employers that ask the same question, that would Africa ever catch up, when it comes to the business process outsourcing space, is to make a case for greatness. There is no exclusivity for greatness. And we've demonstrated this even in other industries, like the healthcare industry in the US and the healthcare industry in the UK and Canada, for example. What
Canada
you would
too.
typically see is you would see Indians, you see Filipinos, and then you see Nigerians, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The same thing with the sport industry, the same thing with hospitality. What we do need to do right now is to build the rails that easily connect our talents to jobs. So I'll give you three major things that we haven't figured out as a continent, right?
Mm.
Number one is the gap in terms of, ease for payments. That's one of the major challenges. If a talent here works for a company in the US, how do I get my money seamlessly, easily, and immediately? Once we crack that, then we need to crack the policy support system that allows these talents to feel safe when they move around with their laptops, right? It allows these talents to go um, into support ecosystems, right? Infrastructures built by the government to allow people to work remotely, to work from, hubs and work
Yeah.
from co-working spaces. But the most important is that we need to preach the gospel of the Nigerian market to the international community, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
one of the things I found very interesting is every time I talk to employers and I talk to investors, they're always very shocked with the quality of young minds that we have from this country. It is just that we haven't exposed ourselves enough, in the business process outsourcing space and in the technology space, right?
Mm.
Over the past 10 years, what we've experienced is an increase in investment in the startup ecosystem.
Mhm.
More entrepreneurs are getting into tech startups from Nigeria, getting into 500, global programs, getting into programs like the Y Combinator, and other programs. More investors are pulling into the country to invest their money in the tech startup ecosystem. Why? Because we have successfully preached the gospel that then communicate the quality of the talents that we have here that are able to build successful businesses. We need to do the same thing on the talent side, and that's what we haven't done. But
Mm.
one thing I also find interesting is the fatigue that is coming from the likes of India and the Philippines. Many of these
Mm.
employers are they saying, because of the demand and supply curve,
Mhm.
right? The price of the talents commodity in India is increasing.
Mm.
Hence, many of these employers are looking for alternatives, right?
Mhm.
And also, they're also looking for diversifying their pool
Mm.
of support staff. Hence, Nigeria and Africa, should be plugging into that space, So,
Mhm.
in terms of the next 5 to 10 years, what I
Mm.
would project and forecast would be more companies placing a bet and experimenting with the Nigerian market.
Mm.
The government
Mm.
positioning itself to then create new policies and understand how to better position the country for that market. And that's also starting. The Nigerian
Mm.
government just launched a program called the NATEP, the National Talent Export Program, right?
Mm.
And there
Mm.
are other initiatives like that, Now we have a much more stabilized, national exchange rate.
Mhm.
With all these initiatives coming on here and there to stabilize the economy, to
Mhm.
create a path for, flow of funds for the talent to accept their money,
Mhm.
building or creating new policies that would, encourage our young people to work from home, work with international company, and globally evangelizing the ecosystem of talents that we have in Nigeria. I don't want to say that we will take over the market, but what I would say categorically is that we'll be second on the list. It's going to be Nigeria, and sorry, it's going to be India and Nigeria. And I can
Mhm.
categorically tell you that because we have three unique opportunities. The first opportunity is the fact that, we speak the Queen's English, right?
Mhm.
So it's easy for the entire European market to understand, the communication pattern for the Nigerian talent. The
Mhm.
second, which is most important for me, is now the time zone. So we're able to
Yeah.
take all markets, right? So we've got
Yeah,
the
even
time
even for the West, sorry to cut you short. Even for the West, it's maybe it's between 6 and 8 hours instead of
exactly.
like 12 to 14 in
Yeah,
some of the some of the areas you just mentioned. But yeah, go
yeah.
on.
Yeah. So that's some sort of like what I see in terms of the opportunities. But I have studied the Indian BPO space, to be honest with you, dogs, in
Mm,
and out. There
mm,
is no greatness without taking on, the challenge and stepping into the ring and
mm,
saying we want to do this. And that's
mm,
why, the likes of myself and some other young entrepreneurs are saying, you know what, even if the system, the infrastructure, the policies, and everything we need is not ready, we
mm,
will play in this space and build the real. And with more people coming into the space to build the real, we
mm,
will do something really fantastic and probably take over the market in the next
mm.
few years. Yeah.
This we are not in rapid fire yet, but this always going to feel like a rapid fire question. So it's absolutely ridiculous. I hope you enjoy, guys, if you're on the pod. But one other thing that I think might even be a subtle factor in making this work is personal branding. So there is the education you guys provide, and as we go on into the pod, I'd like you guys to touch on that. But there is also the branding in itself. So if you don't know, DOTS dots is not actually my real name. My full name is Oludotu. And I've always came up with this excuse to say it's got so many syllables that if I were in a burning building and someone were to call my name, I will be dead before they finish mentioning the full name, which is why dots, one syllable, is safer enough. But the true reason is because of the international integration, right? And I think that's what the Indians haven't really done that so well because they were early starters and they've got the population, and it's kind of like market penetration of export talent. But the Philippines, that's part of what they've done. They they all have Jack. It's kind of like how the Chinese will just take their first name and then turn Win Jianwu into Jackie Chan. Just put Jackie there somewhere. That's what folks like the Philippines have done. That has made employers to be able to communicate to them properly, and feel confident even communicating with them at all. And they've got all these other like Western vibes. I mean, Nigerians do have issues with Western vibes. It's just what it is. We are very affluent, like you said. If you are viewing the pod, you can see Eyitayo all decked out. We are very aggressive. We are very international. We are all that. That's not the point. But the point is probably in the branding, right? Eyitayo is not a bad name. Worst case, you call you Eyi. But we have Aimokwede is somebody's name in Nigeria, and some of those those names are so difficult that they're even difficult for Nigerians themselves to say, given that we're a very diverse country in itself. So is that something that you guys have thought about? Again, very minute, but how far is professional branding important for the African community? And I dare say African community
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we had a guest on the pod who we spent about Brian and I, the producer, spent about 15 minutes trying to get the
Mm,
first name because it started with a so there's all that stuff. And
yeah.
those in the West are like, the first barrier to entry. So how does that play? Is that something you've ever thought about?
I
Maybe on the
mean, so
flight or something.
let me first establish the fact that at Utiva, for instance, right, when
Mhm,
you go through any Utiva training program, you must go through our optimization course. So we've got a personal brand optimization course, right? And I
mhm,
used to take that course personally myself. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, for example, you see it's well branded. I have over 110,000 followers.
mhm,
I've seen hundreds of people benchmark, my LinkedIn profile as a standard,
mhm,
for a very quality LinkedIn profile.
mhm,
But one of the things that we also touch on is culturally, culturally, the Nigerian ecosystem, is also waking up to the reality that, if I want to position myself, better in the at the global markets, I might want to adjust a few things. One of the things I also then realized is that our
yeah,
counterparts internationally, and then also waking up to loving the Nigerian culture and loving
mhm,
our lifestyles. I'll give you a very interesting example.
mhm,
The first few years of my life as an entrepreneur used to be 100%, round neck and a chin and all that. But I am now that young guy that has gotten into Atlas Core, the Antler Entrepreneurship Program, Chieftain Scholarship. I've gotten into over 30 different fellowship programs.
yeah,
And then I have then met people in over 150 countries. And everyone then loved the fact that I show up with my Nigerian native cap. you
yeah,
know. And I hear
yeah,
the ladies and the guys say things like, "Can I get one too?"
yeah,
I've some sort of like built a business around that where I then tell them, "Oh, it's just $10, it's just
yeah,
$15, right?"
yeah,
Because
yeah,
there's now a global cultural integration, and the West now feel falling in love with the African culture, and the Africans also falling in love with the Western culture. But two things that we do need to do well as a country,
mhm,
is learning about other people's culture so that you can create a lower barrier to entry. We're not necessarily saying that you should change your name, but
mhm,
a lot of my friends just call me E,
mhm,
and that's
mhm,
some sort of like what everyone has identified me with.
mhm,
So when
mhm,
I get to a place and I realize that, people really struggle with my name, I just tell them my name is Eyitayo, but for the purpose of this gathering, guys, just call me E, right?
mhm,
That's
mhm,
something. These are the type of things that we're now getting to teach our people here, to understand that most African names are in form of like a story or prayer. So we're not asking you to take away your name, but we are saying that you should just make it easy, for the other people that you work with. And it's not just the name, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
then the culture of trust, you know,
mhm,
taking away that African time mentality and paradigm,
mhm,
and then also feeling more confident in your Africanness, and a
mhm.
lot more beyond just the name. There are several other things
Can,
that we
can you
talk.
explain what African time means for those on the pod?
Yeah, so the African time is the comfort with coming late to events and meetings, just realizing that, or assuming that everyone else is going to come late. When I was
Yeah.
growing up, when myself and my mother we were trying to attend the wedding ceremony, my mom would tell me that, oh, she doesn't want to get there early because everybody will get there late too. So it's that mindset that we then have to just evolve from. And it's
Yeah.
not just the African time thing. It's also realizing that respect is not in the size and the mass and the prostrating, as
Mm,
much as that's the African culture. But when
mm,
people call you out publicly, they are not even doing it out of disrespect. They're
yeah.
probably doing it because they want others to also learn. Because I
Yeah.
remember when I first moved into the US and my senior colleagues called me out publicly, I felt that they hated me or they were just being very
I actually
uh,
have a real life example.
yeah,
The guy
yeah,
DM'd me back, and I'm like, okay, no worries. I will filter it. And then
yeah.
what that caused was that there wasn't enough feedback coming out. So the
Mm,
leadership, my leadership, said we are not getting enough feedback coming out. It looks like a lot of things are happening in DMs. So I was
mm,
like, okay,
yeah.
let's. You see it, bro. You gotta hop it up a little bit, and we'll still have to call you out if needed. So yeah, very very important point. Go on.
So those are all the things that we just have to some sort of like learn. But you know what is very interesting at Utiva that I find very interesting? We
Mm,
have almost 80% of those who are training our talents as Africans and diaspora, right? So
mm,
they are just naturally bringing that knowledge without even institutionalizing it. We have a few of our trainers who have lived in the US, in the UK, in Canada, for example,
mm,
for 5, 6 years. So whenever they come around to train other people who are still at home, they just bring that culture, they bring that level of intelligence, they bring that exposure, into
mm.
the dynamics of the class. So you then see people using words like mic check before they start conversations, not necessarily because it's an African or Nigerian thing, but
Yeah,
because the trainer have done it over the time. I
yeah.
think so that I round up on this part of the question, a situation actually happened in class where the trainer joined the class 15 minutes before the class and the student joined the class 30 minutes before the class. And a
Oh,
lot of them were saying things like, oh, it's Saturday, we have Owambe, Owambe is the party that you
yeah,
do, traditional parties that you do. And then the
yeah,
trainer had to tell them in a very subtle way that, guys, you all want to work with global organizations, global institutions. This is not the way things are done abroad. And
yeah,
that's improved, over time in the class.
yeah,
So
yeah.
just continuously exchanging this knowledge interaction, we'll continue to learn, and I
Mhm.
think that if we continue to double click this for the next few years, we would have a much more, cultural integration. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. We've unpacked a lot right now. And guys, if you're listening, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed this and please share. That's all I'm asking for you. Please share with somebody that you think is looking to do some sort of outsourcing. If you're a startup, looking to scale or you're bootstrapping the low cost way. Especially, I know Eyitayo has mentioned a little bit about the European, but I think there is even a lot of opportunities, way more opportunities in US and Canada, because we know that there is a lot of Indian and Filipino outsourcing going on in that side. So either way, if you know someone that needs it, please share this episode with them, and I really really hope that you find it useful. We'll take a quick break now, and it's going to be the last question. Guys, don't go anywhere. There is still the rapid fire and the last question, so stay with us. Guys, welcome back. So, like I said, it's a Dots Rapid Fire. Right now, Eyitayo is in the SaaS marketing tech court of law, where he's going to answer 3 questions and say the truth and nothing but the truth. Are you ready? Your
Yes,
Oputa
I am.
panel starts now. Okay. Okay, first question. What is your favorite?
Hmm,
How do I put this? Since you are not a core market. Actually, you guys have a product marketing course, don't you?
yes, we do.
Training. Yeah. So, what is your favorite product marketing metric?
I think ultimately the customer lifetime value.
Uh,
That for me is one of the biggest lessons I've learned as an entrepreneur. If you come to me for an investment, I just want to know what the customer lifetime value is. Yeah, that's number one thing I would say is top on my list.
Yeah, it's I if you're a great marketer, that's probably it. That's also my favorite as well. I find I'd rather find a small client size, very small,
Mhm.
and make them buy more from me as they grow,
Correct.
than trying to acquire, which is what
Yeah,
99% of marketing today is all about. Anyway,
yeah.
great answer. Second question: how long do you use social media every day for work?
Uh, I would say an average of 18 hours per day. 18
Jeez.
hours per day. Yeah, I do literally spend half of my time talking on LinkedIn, half of the day on LinkedIn. I'm creating videos. I create an average of 2 to 3 videos per day. You
Wow.
know, yeah. I mean, we've got a very huge marketing team here.
Yeah.
Um, and 7 o'clock, I'm streaming live, you
Yeah.
know, every day I stream live 7 p.m. for about an hour. Yeah, I
Wow.
do a lot on social media. Yeah, a lot.
I mean, it takes a lot to get to 100,000 too. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially on
wow.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, especially on LinkedIn. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. Okay. Last question. What is your favorite business quote?
Um, it's from the scriptures from the Bible.
Mhm.
And I say a man's gifts would make ways for him and make him stand before kings and not mere men.
Mm.
Um, I have
Right. So,
learned that
Proverbs 22 or something like that. Can't
yeah,
remember.
I've learned that as an entrepreneur, um, always look for talented people, because when you hire talented people, you will consistently stand, and outcompete in the market. So every time I'm hiring, I'm just looking for that very exciting, talented person.
Mm, Makes sense. Makes sense. And may I just add, if you're on the pod, you should not be jack of all trades and master of none. I think that's part of what the scripture is saying there. So find your gift so
Yeah,
it makes way for you. That's gift.
exactly.
And in this case, find your gift so that you can export it as a
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
to the companies that want to hire you, and you can get a
Correct.
good to
Correct.
them. You are paying for cheap labor, but to you are even getting way more value on the exchange
Yeah.
rate. So another topic for another day. Okay, last question. At the end of all this, Eyitayo, in terms of the last question, it's really about the learning, right? Even for experienced marketers, you have to learn. There's a wave right now of those taking MBAs. For a good example is, I don't know if you know, PC Timmy. PC Timmy to me is one of is Nigeria's biggest marketer to me, and she's just taken an MBA, and she's like, oh, she needs the business acumen. And I'm like, okay, even though we know there are always different reasons for those things.
Yeah.
But so either you're learning for credentials or you're learning for learning's sake, you have to learn. And for those in Nigeria, you have to learn as well. For those in Africa, you have to learn as well. So what are some of your, or what is your own framework for upskilling? We are talking about tech enthusiasts, we're talking about digital marketing pros in Africa who basically in the case of this topic want to be job ready. What is your framework on how they can upskill?
Yeah. So the first thing, I've got a 5 step that I always talk to our talents to some sort of like follow. The
Mm,
first is to find a path and some sort of like double down and double click, really go deep on that. One
mhm,
of the first mistakes a lot of people make is they want to learn this and learn that and learn this, and then they're spread too thin, right? So find something that you really want to be good at and just go all in that. The
mhm,
second is really find a community of support, right? There's best practices coming literally every minute out there.
mhm,
Being a part of a community gives you that exposure, and when people come to me, for example, and say, how did you then rise to this level in the tech industry? I say the ecosystem. I've mentioned that I've been a part of over 30 different fellowships, communities,
mhm,
associations, just
mhm,
connecting with people.
mhm,
The top one really is to find a mentor and a coach that will dedicate to your growth and your improvement, right? And it's one of the things that we're very big on at Utiva, just giving you a facilitator, a coach, a mentor that will guide you for the next 3 to 4 to 5 months, right? The
mhm.
fourth would be, learning is actually by doing. Go get
Yeah.
dirty, get out there, do and do and do, even when it doesn't make sense. When it doesn't look
Mhm.
like you are getting value for doing, continue to do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I told one of my friends that when he told me, Tayo, what's the value of joining all the speaking engagements? I said, continue to speak, just continue to do it. And finally, is giving back. You know, I honestly think that what makes the difference between great leaders, and
Mm,
those who get stuck at that mediocre average level is the
mm,
quantity or the volume of yourself that you can throw out there to people. So you too have to be a mentor to others, be a
Mm,
coach, be a trainer, run your
mm.
own podcast and be like Dot, right? Just give
Yes,
yourself,
please.
just give yourself out to the world, because the world then compensates you heavily. I'll round up this by saying that I make an average of £100,000 every year, you
Mm,
know, because of the work that I've done in the past, because of
mhm,
how much I have given in the past. You see
mhm.
people recommending me for consulting a gig because they say, oh, while I was just talking to you, I just got an email. Someone just
Yeah.
recommended me for another company that wants to come to Nigeria and say, talk to Eyitayo,
Wow.
because I've
Yeah.
given so much and the world is compensating me. So follow the five framework, and then you will
Mm.
see what happens to you at the end of the day.
I love this. I love what you mentioned. The income thing is as well is fantastic, which is awesome, even in US standards. Um, and just to add to what you said, I think the most important thing for me in all of this is learn by doing.
Right.
Here's the problem that I see. People go through the stress of training, and I get it. Some of these trainings are intense. And they want to get a job right away. Not just that they want to
Mm.
get a job that pays something, they want to get a job that pays something very high and crazy.
I know.
Because they had a testimony in from one of their friends who just finished the boot camp and now is on dollar CAD or US six figures, right? So I think if you're in the pod, it's important for you guys to know why sometimes there will be some tasks that will just be like errands, as it were. If you're applying for a job, except if somebody really asks you, no one is necessarily going to care whether what you're paid for or not. They'll just see the quality of work that you have done, and if you can sort of describe that job description in your CV properly. So that's very, very key for those, and it helps employers. It helps the employers to also manage their expectations as well, in terms of what they are, if they're able to afford you or not, which is something that is really prevalent in this, I call it the cold recession world. It's actually recession
Mm.
in the developed and developing world. So that really makes sense there. Eyitayo, so nice to have this conversation. Lots of value, of course. We will definitely be doing a lot together. You always when you follow someone for like 6 years, 7 years, you're like, this guy is doing some nice stuff.
Yeah.
How
Thank you.
and then the person eventually comes to you. So it's really, really an honor having you here, and having to also speak on this topic. And I
Yeah.
hope pod is being useful as well. So where can
Yeah.
people follow you? Where can people learn more from you? For the companies that are hiring, like I said again, especially from our side of the West, US and Canada, and for the those back home in Nigeria that would like to upskill and become part of that network, where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's easy to find it. My email is quite very easy. It's very easy. It's just e@utiva.io. And I respond quite very fast. LinkedIn, my name is Eyitayo on LinkedIn.
Mm,
Think those are like the two great places to find me. My email again is e@utiva.io,
mm.
and my LinkedIn profile is my name is Eyitayo on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, if you want to enjoy more of these episodes, just go to my website, dotslovesmarketing.com. You can also follow the Marketing Leadership Podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Till next time, connect the dots.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Dots Loves Marketing. There will be links to any resources mentioned in today's show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.